What you doing?
Ran out of space on my phone, so I'm deleting some stuff. Bye, singing dog. Bye, goal.
I pronounce you
Bye,
husband.
wedding ceremony.
Stop. At Metro PCS, you get 2 free phones with twice as much memory.
Really?
Don't say bye to your memories. Switch to Metro PCS and get 2 free LG K20 Plus phones with 32 gigs when you switch 2 lines. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to your Partner in Success Radio, hosted by serial entrepreneur Denise Griffiths. Denise offers a full menu of on-the-web services for all your online needs. Denise and her team of virtual assistants can help manage your online business, including social media channels, blogs, web portals, and more. YourOfficeOnTheWeb.com is a comprehensive resource to help you combine the power of your brand, your connections, and innovative ideas to develop a full online strategy that can guarantee a strong, profitable impact on your business.
Good morning and welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. I'm your host, Denise Griffiths, and every week I am truly honored to share the microphone with really interesting people. Now, these are people who are business leaders, they're authors, they're speakers, but they are people who have wonderful stories to share and who are going to freely share their journeys, their business wisdom, their tips, and best of all, their actionable advice with this audience. In short, they are willing to help us shorten our learning curve as we navigate the know, like, and trust economy. In fact, my guests are so compelling and so insightful that this podcast was recently written up on Inc.com as one of the best business podcasts you need to be listening to now, and has been mentioned on Entrepreneur and MSNBC. And I thank my guests for that. So our topic today, what motivates getting things done, with clinical psychologist, psychoanalyst, and professor Dr. Mary Lamia. Now, Mary says that we are not solely motivated by positive emotion. And she further says a marvel of evolution is that we are also motivated and even driven to achieve by negative emotions. And contrary to popular belief, procrastination, which is our big topic today, does not necessarily interfere with success, and early action does not inevitably result in favorable outcome. And we're also going to learn that anxiety is a powerful engine that drives us. And I have to tell you, I'm going to out myself right now. In our pre-call before we got the show scheduled, and just now in the green room, Mary asked me if I was a procrastinator, and I admit I went, and I almost lied to her. And the truth is, I am a heck of a procrastinator, so I have given her permission to help me on this show. So, Mary, good morning. Welcome to your Partner in Success, and I am both scared to death and really excited to have you here.
Good morning, Denise. You know, you are very lucky to be a successful procrastinator. In fact, part of the reason I wrote this book is because, during the 40 years that I've been in practice as a clinical psychologist, many of the high-achieving individuals I worked with are self-identified procrastinators, as are many of the graduate students I've taught in the last 20 years. And so I was very curious, because I am not a procrastinator. I am what I call task-driven. I separate people into task-driven non-procrastinators. Those are people like me who are activated emotionally by a task that is left undone. When we see something that's not done, the emotion stirs in us, and we feel compelled to do it, and to do it right now. The other group are deadline-driven procrastinators, and those are people whose emotions are activated by a deadline. So it's all about when your emotions are activated and what activates them that determines your style. So I assumed for many years that delay was maladaptive, and unfortunately, those of us who are early birds tend to assume we do it right, and we are so wrong. I have been massively humbled by my inquiry into this subject of motivational styles. So I studied a lot of highly successful.
Already. I'm breathing again.
You'll feel even better, Denise, because you are going to be totally vindicated by the time we finish this conversation.
Oh, right. Because we do beat ourselves up. We're taught, don't put it off, get it done. You've got more, fires to stomp out. So I'm constantly talking to myself. I love deadlines. Deadlines get my adrenaline going. I mean, my creativity just shows up when it needs to. But if I have to sit myself down and say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'll go do dishes. Seriously, I will walk off and go do dishes.
Well, now think about that. That's not so bad. One of the things procrastinators beat themselves up about. One of the things procrastinators beat themselves up about is that when they have this frenzy of activity or anxiety when a deadline is imminent, when they have to attend to a project, they don't realize it's not quite the deadline yet for them, but they feel the emotion stirring in them. And so what happens is that emotion gets directed to all the other things they haven't done in the meantime, throughout the day, the week, whatever it happens to be. So they attend to all these other things, and they think they are distracted. They say, I get distracted by so many other things when I have to finish a project, when the deadline is here. But yet, they don't realize that it's just that their emotion is activated by a deadline. Emotion makes you pay attention. That's the purpose of our emotions. Emotions garner our attention. And so, we wouldn't survive if we didn't have the emotions that make us attend to things. Emotions make something call us. And I guess the best example is when you have an attraction to somebody. You feel a certain level of emotion, and it pulls you toward them. It pulls your attention toward them. It makes you think about that person. Same thing is true of tasks. When you have an emotion that's activated, you attend to the task. And procrastinators do that at a deadline. But when that emotion gets stirred, they may do all kinds of other things because they're stirred up by their emotion, rather than attend specifically to the task. But eventually they get to the task, and they tend to do things in one draft, in one sitting. They are able to hold things in working memory for a long time and then put it all together at one point. Whereas people who are task-driven, we just keep doing and doing and doing, and we redo and redo. So you might get an email from a task-driven person that says, here's my document, and then 2 hours later get another one that says, read this one instead, because we do it and we undo it. You've seen that?
Yeah.
If you when you get those, you can be sure they're task-driven. Procrastinators don't do that.
No, we don't. We get it all done in one fell swoop.
And you put it out there, and you don't revise it. So you may go back and have some regret, like, I could have done it better, maybe if I gave myself more time. There's the guilt and the shame. Procrastinators have a lot of guilt and shame. Yeah. And not only has the public put that on people who delay, but also there's 1,000 studies of procrastination behavior that seek to find some pathology or undesirable characteristic that makes people procrastinate. And it is wrong. In fact, I was recently speaking at a 10th biennial procrastination conference, and I told the procrastination researchers, stop shaming procrastinators. It is a valid motivational style. They try to correlate procrastination with a lack of conscientiousness, impulsivity, pathological worry, work avoidance, neuroticism, task aversiveness, avoidance motives. They've even said cyber slacking, a means of avoiding shame and guilt, self-handicapping. It goes on and on and on. And most of these studies have mixed results or get refuted on the next round. So why is it that they haven't been able to find the core of pathology in procrastinators? Because there is none. The problem with these studies is that they do not separate people who procrastinate and succeed from people who procrastinate and fail. And the ones who are delaying and failing are not true procrastinators. They are people who unfortunately have been defeated time and time again, and so they delay and blame it on procrastinating when in fact there's something else going on with them emotionally that they don't want to look at. And it's so important, you know, when you feel shame about failing, you want to save face. Shame is an emotion, a very important emotion that motivates us to save face. So we have certain responses to shame that make us try to do that. Often people hide or withdraw or avoid or attack somebody else. But in terms of people who delay and fail, they often blame it, attack procrastination behavior or the fact that they've delayed rather than look at themselves. So we'll put them aside from now and let's just talk about highly successful people who procrastinate, because I do separate them out from people who fail.
When you were going down that list of all the things that people are trying to attach to successful procrastinators, and honestly, until I met you and spoke with you a few weeks ago, I didn't know there was any such term. I mean, you should have seen me when we got off the phone. I did my little happy dance, my little rooster dance around the house. I'm the man. I mean, it's just because like I told you in the green room just now, our virtual green room, I get a massive amount of work done. People often ask me if I've cloned myself or how big my team is. I get a ton of work done, and it used to be that I would go to bed at night and run down the things that I didn't get done. It's like, oh, geez. I started stopping myself from doing that and saying, okay, Denise, look for your wins. You got this done and this done. Oh, that was a big one. Then I can fall asleep happy when I am able to fall asleep. The next day I wake up, I'm still happy because I had all these successes under my belt. And yeah, I'm going to procrastinate. It's in my nature. It always has been. I do not consider myself a failure as a procrastinator. And I'm so glad that you're making that distinction.
Well, you said a couple of things that are very important things.
I did.
You can get something done and go to bed. People who are task-driven, the task-driven successful people I studied were very interesting to me. They have a hard time going to bed, and they often are the ones who compromise their sleep. Well,
yeah, I don't sleep well at all. That's something else.
Task-driven people don't sleep well because if there is something left undone, it bothers them until they do it. Oh. So they may get up and get something done that is really insignificant. And if they have a procrastinating partner, the partner who procrastinates just doesn't understand this kind of behavior. Or why can't you just let it wait until tomorrow? Task-driven people have a hard time letting it wait. Deadline-driven procrastinators often don't sleep because they compromise their sleep because they need to move their deadline up a little bit. I mean, one of the things I say about optimizing your motivational style, and we can get to that later on, is never compromise your sleep. Whether you're task-driven or deadline-driven, it's very, very important to have a good night's sleep for the sake of your brain. But the other thing you said had to do with regrets. And regrets are very, very important. Highly successful people tend to have a lot of regret and or guilt. Regret is actually a cognition associated with the emotion of guilt or shame. And so why is that successful people tend to beat themselves up a little bit? And they're also a bit perfectionistic, and I have a whole chapter on the pursuit of excellence, which really has to do with the perfectionistic standards of highly successful people and why is it that they have those. So one of the things we know is that all of that relates to the emotion of shame. Back to shame again. Shame is one of our greatest teachers. And the upside of shame, and that's another book I just wrote, is that it can motivate positive action. And in healthy learning, Shame motivates our attention to error and a desire to change the self. So people who are highly successful, you would think, would have the ability to learn from shame. They are able to look at themselves and think, well, how could I have done it differently? Or they beat themselves up for a while and they consider what they did and what they can do differently. There are those 4 responses to shame that are often maladaptive. Withdrawal, like, you feel like you could have done it better, so instead you get into bed and pull the covers over your head. Or avoidance, where people who feel shame tend to have a few drinks instead of looking at themselves. Or they blame other people, they attack others, and they say it's somebody else's fault instead of looking at what they did. Or they attack themselves and say, well, I'm just a stupid idiot, rather than look at themselves and say, yes. Just talked to somebody early this morning who unfortunately went back with an old boyfriend and knew it was wrong and once again got burned and was calling herself an idiot and denigrating herself. And my comment was, what are you learning? And what is your brain trying to tell you when you say that to yourself? It's trying to alert you to the fact that you need to learn something. So let's try to learn something from the shame you experience, from the humiliation you experience in doing something that wasn't right for you. And so what we want is for people to take a look at their regrets and learn something. And highly successful people tend to do that. Now, it's not like they always trust themselves.
No, and I don't notice that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to give you an example of one man I spoke with who writes reports for a living. I gave an example of him in the book. And he always does it at the deadline, and he executes it in one draft, of course, and he always does them very, very well. And people love his reports. He's very successful in his work. And yet one day he started doubting himself. Now, this was in the midst of an approaching deadline. So remember, his anxiety was starting to rise. And instead of focusing his anxiety on the task at hand, because it wasn't quite close enough to the deadline, he focused it on, maybe I don't write such good reports. So he scrambled around his file and pulled out his reports and started reading his old reports, and there was nothing he would have changed in any of them. And he realized
that's just it. So he was able to pull himself back from the precipice.
And take his anxiety and focus his attention, now that the deadline was even closer, on what he was doing. So, we have regrets and we have self-doubt, but highly successful people have those all the time.
You don't see people out there, pick anybody who's highly, highly successful. Tony Robbins, Richard Branson, and any number of entrepreneurs. And they'll be fairly transparent with why they're doing what they're doing, but you don't see them up there on the bully pulpit just beating the crap out of themselves. They're just not going to write. They're not going to do that. And I put it a little bit differently than you do, but it may arrive down the same path, at the same destination. But once I realized that I was indulging and engaging in what I can only call stinking thinking. We all have our little internal voice, like the person you just referenced. I'm an idiot, and we all do that. And I would catch myself doing, Denise, I would hear Reba McEntire in my head, Mo Ron. Did you ever see that show of hers? It was so cute, Mo Ron.
No.
And she's got that Oklahoma accent. And I would pretend like I was kidding myself, but I really wasn't. And honestly, it came to me one day, a long time ago, that if any living person attempted to speak to me the way I speak to me, and they did it in public, I'd knock them on their butt. So I stopped. Yeah, you don't let anybody else trash talk to you like that. You don't do it to yourself either. Identify what the problem is.
It's not a way to learn.
Work through it. Move on.
Exactly. The most important thing I find is that people have to learn about their emotions and understand their emotions and how your emotions work for you. That we have evolved with a motivational system where some emotions feel positive or rewarding and some feel negative or punishing. And just as you said in the beginning of the program, classifying emotions as positive or negative has little to do with their value, but instead it has to do with how they motivate us by the way they make us feel. So negative emotions like distress or fear or anger, disgust, and shame motivate us to do something to avoid experiencing them or urge us to behave in ways that will relieve their effects. So it's actually a negative way to motivate us. So, if we're in a dangerous situation, the emotion of fear will motivate us to back off. Or if we're going to go on an interview or a date, we are motivated by our shame anxiety to brush our teeth because we don't want to embarrass ourselves due to bad breath. So emotions motivate every single thing we do, and they also create who we become. You mentioned always procrastinating, always having the style that you have. Well, you know what? That is true. I have found in the people I studied that as of around third grade, they had this style. And I don't know if you did this when you were a kid, but the deadline-driven procrastinators tell me stories about coming home from school and ignoring their homework and going out and play because they wanted to go out and play. And then they would do their homework at the last minute or on the way to school or during recess, but they would get it done and they performed well. Whereas task-driven people like me, those people would come home, they would have to get that homework off their plate. Otherwise, they couldn't enjoy themselves. Now,
I very definitely did it in the bus on the way to school.
You
very definitely. If I did it at all.
That's right. And see, task-driven people can't do that because at a deadline, many task-driven people become disabled by their anxiety rather than able to use the emotion that propels them. And so it's important to know where your anxiety is optimal. Is it optimal early on, or is it optimal at a deadline? And yours is optimal at a deadline. If I did my homework on the way to school on the bus, I might be too anxious to really concentrate because I'd be afraid I would get there. There's another thing, too. Task-driven people have an enormous fear of forgetting. That's one of the reasons why they have a difficult time going to bed when something is left undone, because they're afraid they're going to forget, or they have to do something now. They often say, I have to do it now, otherwise I'll forget. Whether it's a bill or a project, whatever it is, they've got to do it now because they are motivated by this fear of forgetting, which is really technically a fear of forgetting is a cognition associated with shame, anxiety, the idea that they will forget and somehow be negatively evaluated or negatively perceived, or something bad will happen. They always think something bad will happen that will interfere with getting a project done if they don't do it right now, like whether it's an earthquake or a tornado or whatever it has to be.
Right.
Both.
I'm sorry. Are you finding that these different types of people, I'm definitely in one camp. Are you finding that we're better suited for different types of industry or leadership? Are you finding that there's kind of a line down the middle of the page where you can comfortably put some of us and comfortably put the rest of us?
Not
or
really.
Can we change? Can we become both?
Oh, I didn't find any of that. It's more about getting familiar with your own style and being able to use it effectively in whatever you do. the problem seems to happen when people work together and don't understand one another. But I found top leaders who were procrastinators and those who were task-driven. It's just a different style, different way of doing things. But I'm glad you asked that, because what is success? I define success, every single highly successful person I studied, there were 2 criteria for success, however you want to define it. One is that they never miss deadlines, whether or not they procrastinate in the process. And 2 is that their work reflects their best efforts. You can get something done ahead of time, but it doesn't mean you do a good job. Many task-driven people who are not successful just get something done to get it off their plate, but they don't necessarily do their best work. So the criteria for success just boils down to never missing a deadline and your work reflecting your best efforts. That's it.
And see, I don't want to produce something, and I really want to go back to perfectionism, because, man, that has crippled me more often than not. I admit that. And that's before I put pen to paper or even get to my keyboard. I'm already having the argument in my head. It's bizarre. But I'm finding
the perfectionism?
that when, yeah. I mean, and we'll go back to that in just a second, because I would love to hear what you can share with us about that. But I'm finding that when I hit a deadline, and I have a lot of them, I have 2 of them today, and they're hard deadlines, and I will hit them and pick up my dog from the groomer at the same time. I mean, it'll happen. But I find that I'm actually energized by that. I could have done some of the work, the prelim work yesterday. My brain just doesn't function that way. It's already laid out in my head. I already know what I'm going to do. I can see it from conception to ending. Now all I have to do is execute. Does that make sense?
And that is one of those regret thoughts. I could have done it. I could have done it yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Well, no, you couldn't have done it
I didn't want to.
Because
no, it wasn't in my head yesterday.
You didn't have the emotional motivation to do it. And when people say, I should be doing something early, but I don't have the motivation, that's where they beat themselves up. They don't have the motivation because their emotions are not activated. And that's why I devote a chapter in the book about what emotions are, how they are activated, what happens in the process of an emotion being activated, and why they motivate us the way they do. And I want my main concern was to help people understand their emotions and how they work, so that they can use them very effectively or not beat themselves up when an emotion is not activated and they think it should be. Now, I will say that deadline-driven procrastinators in particular have a lot of interesting tricks, of ways in which they activate emotion before a deadline to get themselves moving. And
sure.
There are ways in which managers can do that if they have deadline-driven procrastinators working for them. For example, rather than give somebody a project and say, I'll check in with you in 2 months, to have weekly check-ins. So you automatically create a number of deadlines. I had one graduate student, for example, who was the most highly successful procrastinating graduate student I've ever met. And in fact, she wrote her dissertation before anybody in her class of 60 students. And she did it by using little tricks, like she would contact me and say, can we meet next Wednesday? I would like to give you an idea of what I've done this far. And so when she would say, can we meet next Wednesday, she knew that was a deadline. And she had to do so much up to that point. And she would do it perfectly every time. And so I didn't realize what she was doing when she would send me an email and say, by next Friday, I am going to send you my chapter 2. Until time went on and I realized, she was creating deadlines. And that's what she did.
Now, did she know this? Was she aware of and consciously doing it, or did that just feel right to her?
She was, when we talked about it later and I asked her about it, she was only aware that that's what she needed to do to make sure she did it. So,
and I asked because I do the same thing. I mean, I do exactly that. With my Girl Power Tribe, there's 3 of us. We jump on the phone every 2 weeks. We're going through a couple of high-end, fairly expensive courses. We all know that we're busy. We're dealing with client work. So I will send a note to both of them and say, okay, I'm working on this particular chapter, and I will have it done by tonight. That has set that firmly in my head. They don't care as long as I deliver on the call date. But it tricks me into saying, okay, now you're right, I've got a deadline. But the difference there is I'm aware that I'm doing it. I know exactly what I'm doing.
And you are making a promise, by making a promise to somebody
them
else,
and to me. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. You have a deadline that you will not miss, and
no,
that's what these people do. Now, here I am a psychologist, and I never realized that because so much of procrastination is kept secret, and what you procrastinators do is kind of a secret life where you have all your strategies, and if you think that you are going to be denigrated in any way for having this style, you're not going to expose to the world like, I have to give you this deadline so that I'll do it. You just do it. And so you have found your ways, and they are. I am so humbled by this study of procrastinators. I can't tell you. I am so amazed by this style. I have procrastination envy. I wish I could do it.
I can give you some of mine.
I wish I could do it. And so that's the thing is and many of the interviews I've done with task-driven people, they keep saying, well, can these people change? How do you change them? And
why would you want to change them?
I don't want to change anyone. Yes, why would you want to change somebody who has such an amazing motivational style that ensures their success? It's sort of like left-handedness. There was a time in our culture where we saw left-handedness as a sin, as a devil's
evil
work, as something wrong with people.
Witchcraft, and there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we would do all kinds of things to these poor kids who were left-handed. And I see it sort of like that. We do not understand this motivational style, and it's time that we do. I don't want to forget about your thought about perfectionism.
It's I beat myself up about it quite a bit, and maybe this is where you can say, okay, Denise, here's some tricks and tips that you can use, because our audience probably has a lot of the same anxiety that I have, if you will. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not comfortable using the term anxiety when I'm speaking about myself, but if we're going to be very honest here, and I am, I have anxiety fairly often, especially when I'm looking at a deadline. Like I said, I'm looking at 2 today. I've already got them worked out, so I'm not that worried about it. But, every once in a while I'll realize that I'm experiencing a bit of anxiety. And I'm like, where in the heck did that come from? And without exception, once I start tracing it back, I take it right back to perfectionism, without exception.
Denise, anxiety is your friend.
Oh, good, because I don't like her.
It's your best
We have
friend.
chats.
She's great. Well, one of the things we have to do, maybe first, before we get to perfectionism, is understand anxiety. You have it all. You're my perfect procrastinator. I just want to take you home and just put you on a little shelf and say, I'm going to show you off as my perfect procrastinator. All right, so anxiety.
And I avoided even terming myself a procrastinator. I wouldn't even admit it to myself. I knew I was. I mean, clearly I knew. But, I always just kind of prided myself on getting things done and not pulling back the curtain and letting people see that, I was actually out playing with the dog in the backyard when I could have been building, something really techy. And finally I just said, I get stuff done. I am known for getting, just put it in Southernese, a crap ton of stuff done. What am I worried about? Yeah, I'm a procrastinator. Deal with it. It's who I am.
Well,
it took me a long time to get there.
Just as an aside, some of the young people I interviewed were actually proud of being a procrastinator. Not very many of them, but some of them were proud of it because they knew they could pull things off at a deadline, and they had great pride in doing it and in the thrill of doing it. And this is why some of the procrastination researchers said the problem with people who procrastinate is that they're thrill seekers, and that's why they do it, which is not why they do it. But
no, I'm not a thrill seeker at all, so I would have to argue with that.
Pride. And when you think about it, the current statistics are that 70 to 95% of college students procrastinate, and the highest levels of procrastination are found in the Ivy League schools.
Well, that makes
sense. Now, those
sense.
people are not all failing. So maybe it's not such a bad thing. But let me just get back to anxiety, because anxiety is so important. So many negative emotions these days are erroneously labeled as a problem. And we have to get rid of our emotions because they are a problem, like anxiety, like you're not supposed to feel it, or you want to get rid of it, or it's bad. And again, labeling emotions as positive or negative has nothing to do with their value. And part of this maybe is because of this whole positive psychology movement, and the positive psychology movement is really about resilience. It's not about negative emotions being bad. It's not about how we should always feel positive. And people have kind of glommed onto that and think they have to feel positive all the time. So let's just settle it with emotions are emotions. They're neither bad or good. And anxiety is one of the most misunderstood emotions. Anxiety itself is not a core emotion. Anxiety it's actually made up of two or more core emotions. It's a blend of emotions that produces an emotional response. And this kind of blending of different emotions creates the different ways in which states of anxiety are experienced. For example, anxiety can be felt as a little bit of excitement. You feel anxiety if you fall in love with somebody and you're about to see them. You feel anxiety if you're about to do something that causes you a little bit of stress. You feel certain kinds of anxiety when you feel disgusted. So there's different kinds of anxiety, and it has to do with which emotions are blended. So if you have anxiety about having a lot of things to get done or little time to do them, the anxiety you feel likely involves this coalescence of fear and distress. Generally, the emotion of distress alone is felt as somewhat of agitation, annoyance, or tension, and it motivates you to anticipate what's going to go wrong and try to solve the problem. So the combination of distress and fear is what people describe as the anxiety they feel when they are stressed out. And that's highly intense, but time-limited for procrastinators at a deadline, and it's a more continuous experience for task-driven people because the uncompleted task constantly grabs their attention. And so you have to ask, is it actually more stressful to experience that time-limited burst of anxiety at a deadline, or the continuous anxiety of task-driven people? Well, we'll never know that, but actually, stress isn't bad for you. How one responds to stress determines whether or not it's harmful. Because when people believe that stress is harmful, they become distressed by their stress, and that amplifies the effect. And the current research suggests that stress is only harmful if you believe it is. It's very important when you feel stress, when you feel that anxiety, to say to yourself, this is my emotional system attempting to motivate me to do something. That's important. If you combine anger with fear or distress, that produces an anxiety that feels like agitation or an angry urgency. Sometimes people at a deadline are really short-tempered, or people who are task-driven, when they have a lot of things they feel they must get done right away, they have this angry urgency. And that's a different kind of anxiety. If you blend excitement with fear, you feel positive and negative at the same time, like when you go on a roller coaster ride, or when you complete a lot of things under a time pressure. I mean, that's a certain feeling of anxiety with excitement. We can combine disgust with fear, and that produces disgust anxiety. So we feel anxious about encountering something disgusting, or we can experience it as a fear of being disgusting, and so we're motivated to do something about it. So anxiety has all kinds of different combinations, but the biggest one that motivates people is the combination of fear and shame. And at an emotional level, that combination produces shame anxiety. It's a fear of being negatively perceived. And so when those two emotions arise together to produce shame anxiety, we have the thought that involves a fear of failure. And highly successful people tend to have what they call a fear of failure. And they think it's a bad thing, when really a fear of failure is simply shame anxiety, a combination of fear and shame, where your emotions are motivating you to do something because you don't want to be negatively perceived by failing. It's a great thing.
I fall in that category, I believe.
You fall
because
in
once you
all
got
of them.
there, I was
That's
like,
why
okay,
you're my
there
perfect
I
procrastinator.
Oh, God. But you know what happens? You know, I'm aware enough now. I'm adulting. I'm learning how to adult. And I'm aware enough now that when I catch myself doing these things, I know what the outcome's going to be, so I don't beat myself up too bad. But eventually, if I'm paying attention, and I do, just because it's fun to watch my own journey, after a while, once I settle down at my keyboard and I've got my research around me, I've got my tools, I know my bottle of water, I know what I need to do. Cats are fed, everybody's taken care of. Within, I'm going to say about 15, 20 minutes, I'm in my happy place. I'm no longer worried. I'm no longer worried about perfectionism or how it's going to be perceived. I'm in the zone. Does that make sense?
There's a big section of the book that talks about that feeling of being in the zone. And that is actually another version of anxiety that has more excitement than fear, and it makes you feel as though you're highly focused, intensely
very
focused. Much. And there's an elated quality that goes with it. And that's where you convert the anxiety that is like shame anxiety to a blend of excitement with the fear. And yes,
and it's amazing
it is
because
an experience.
Oh, it is. I actually look forward to it. It's almost like my little high. But what I find too is that often, not every single time, depends on how I go into it, what blend I'm going into it with, but often I will find out, that time slows down. It's almost like I'm commanding time to do what I want it to do. And I have no more, oh my God, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done in 15 minutes. I'm not putting any pressure on myself at all. It's like I'm fully in charge. It's a darndest thing. I really enjoy
it. But see how your anxiety converts to something more, a feeling of more positive anxiety, because the negative emotion has pushed you into sitting down and starting. And once you sit down and start, you convert maybe the fear and shame to excitement and fear. And so you get in the zone. It works that way. Your emotions compelled you to get your water, to sit down, to get the cats fed, to do everything, and to focus your attention. That's what emotions are made to do. That's why
I'm so fascinated by this. I always thought that I was just one of those people that, okay, everybody clear the room because you can't talk to me for the next 8 hours.
Oh, geez.
But
especially
seriously.
deadline-driven procrastinators do that. One told me you could drive a semi through the room and, we wouldn't hear it or feel it.
Oh, exactly.
Because
and
the focus
we don't want any noises.
Intense.
Right, no music in the background, no phones going off, just everybody. And I live alone, thank God. Clearly I should because of who I am. And, I'm a high-functioning introvert, but
maybe we
honestly,
should all live alone because of who we are.
I think that's largely the case. But the truth is, I can go from getting up every 15 minutes like a yo-yo to, refresh myself or wander around. I still get a ton of stuff done. But then going into this zone where I, may look up and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't want to go to bed because I'm on it. But
your brain knows exactly what to do, and your emotions
it does.
Put you there, and you use them very, very effectively. So is that perfectionistic, or, how does perfectionistic tendencies play a part in this? Successful people tend to think of themselves as perfectionistic because they consistently set high yet attainable standards and goals. You don't defeat yourself. You set those standards and goals and you meet them. And it's a quality I found in both deadline-driven procrastinators and task-driven non-procrastinators. But the manner in which they go about dealing with their perfectionist tendencies, of course, differs.
Right.
Underneath it all is another emotion. Underneath perfectionism, the pursuit of excellence is often driven by our attempt to evade anticipated shame. The idea that you are going to lose face or experience any kind of shame pushes you forward.
Well, I'm looking at your book.
It's the most adaptive use of a negative emotion there is. Shame is
exactly,
great.
and I'm looking at Chapter 8 in your book, Optimizing Your Motivational Style. And that's kind of where I wanted to go. What kind of advice or tips can you give people who are maybe just now recognizing what their style is and understanding that procrastination is not necessarily a bad thing? That doing it one way or the other, neither is a bad thing. You just have to figure out how to work within the way you operate.
Exactly. I have some general guidelines for people, and again, I note that I don't want to change anybody. I just want to help them be better at what they do already, because we have this reservoir, this warehouse of emotional memories in our brain, and every time an emotion is triggered in the present, it instantaneously gets filtered through all of our emotional memories. It is so fast that happens instantly. And it informs us, and then an emotion pops up. So our brain is designed to look at our past without us even knowing it and make a decision as to what we feel. So, there's ways to reconstruct that a little bit. But basically, we become who we are based on our warehouse of emotional memories. That's make up our belief systems. What are beliefs? What are our convictions, our political beliefs, religious practices? So many things are the result of a lifetime of emotional memories coupled with an ideology, and that's what makes us have the thoughts we have about certain things. So it's just important for people who have certain styles to find ways that they can optimize them. And, for everybody, it's really important to figure out how you perform optimally and to learn from mistakes, to always be able to take a look at oneself and learn. People who have a deadline-driven style, they will optimize their style if they figure out how to create deadlines for themselves or how to create definite cutoff points. To-do lists are good for everybody. Most of the successful people I studied have to-do lists, and they use them, and procrastinators often create a to-do list that they resolve to get through by the end of the day, and that helps because it makes them get a lot of things done, and they're sort of challenging themselves. They like to challenge themselves, like, setting timers or having, setting a deadline by telling another person, as we talked about earlier. The sleep habits are important, though. I don't want anybody to sacrifice sleep.
Yeah, I've always had and I say this all the time, and anybody who knows me is not surprised by this, but sleep has been something that's always been a little bit foreign to me. I require very little, and when I do sleep, I don't really, really sleep. I may sleep I catnap all night long. And, I never fall into a deep, deep, deep sleep. I actually started a program to see if I could do this recently, to put myself to bed. Take my shower, do all your, your beauty rituals.
At the exact
put
same
myself
time
in my
every day.
jammies.
Yeah.
Yes. I put it on my iPhone. I put the little sleep timer, and it's, does this little lullaby, and I'm like, okay, fine. And then I grudgingly take myself to, go start getting ready for bed. But I'm a reader, and I've always read. I will read the back of a cereal box if that's all there is, and it's been my lifelong habit to read myself to sleep. Well, here's the problem. I've got thousands, literally thousands of books in my house, in my garage, in armoires. They're everywhere. But I've switched to my iPad, my e-reader. Bad move. So I'm trying to wean myself off of reading, on an e-reader because of the lighting issues, and go back to a book. And
well,
I
when
like
you read
having
book,
my
did
Kindle.
Did they put you to sleep?
No, but at least my eyes
didn't
didn't hurt.
So what's the difference?
Apparently it's the blue light that has some disruption
well,
with your
I know about all
neuroreceptors.
that, but
Right.
even with the book, you're not going to sleep.
No, but I feel like I'm doing something good for myself, so there's that. But
Okay.
no, I'm really not going. I know. I'm trying to trick myself into going to sleep every night.
It's really hard to switch oneself to a certain time, like I'm going to go to bed at 11 and get up at 7. If you've been going to bed all different times, it's really hard to
whenever I felt
switch
like
into that. Yes, so you have to do it very slowly. And some research says you need to start with not the time you go to bed, you need to start with the time you get up. And you need to make that.
I heard that the other day.
Totally
somebody said something like that. Yeah, explain that if you would, because this is the second time I've heard this.
So they find that if you're trying to change your sleep habits, you don't pick your bedtime. Instead, pick your rising time. Just pick the time you think is best for you to get up every single day, and you set your alarm for that. And you get up when that alarm goes off, and you open the curtains and stand in the light. If there isn't any light outside, you get in the light. First thing you do. And you do that for a week or two. You pick your rising time and make it absolutely consistent and make sure you get into the light. That's when you could turn on your iPad, I guess. And then you pick your bedtime.
Right.
But if you pick your rising
sense.
time, your bedtime will come around.
Gotcha. My eyes,
and if
the
you
minute
don't take
the sun
naps,
peeks out, I'm awake. It doesn't matter if I'm in a blackout room. It doesn't matter. My body knows when the sun is coming up.
Well, that's good. So if you make that absolutely consistent, your bedtime might follow, or it might be easier to have your bedtime follow. But that's one of the things I tell people is to make sure you have healthy sleep habits. But if it's not impacting your life, you might be driving yourself crazy trying to make this different, Denise.
Well, that's what I'm finding, to be honest. I feel very adult. I feel like I'm, all grown up now and I'm making good decisions. I'm not having fun with it. I don't want to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. I don't want to go to bed at 11 o'clock at night. I want to go to bed when I want to go to bed. I will say, because, I've done it for long enough now, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, that I am heading in that direction at a reasonable hour. I am actually, putting myself into my bedtime routine instead of falling asleep on the couch, which I got a real bad habit of doing.
Oh, so
Wake up, the TV's off, you're drooling.
Not good.
You're not good. No.
Not good.
Not good at all.
It's better to make it the bed.
Yeah, and I'm working on that.
You're obviously successful at what you do, and you have found ways to be a great procrastinator. Deadline driven. You're deadline driven.
I'm so glad that you gave me permission to be me, because, honestly, I have beat myself up for it for years. Nobody else has. Nobody's called me out on it that I'm aware of. But I've always just gone, oh, Denise, why do you do this? Why do you wait till the last 12 seconds to do something, which, of course, is an exaggeration. But it finally, I'm in a position now where I live alone, I work alone, I have my own business. I can do what I darn well do. Want to do. Do I have responsibilities with my clients? Absolutely. Do they get done? Absolutely. So, I quit beating myself up about it. And I'm so glad to know that there are studies being done that it's not necessarily a bad thing. In some cases, for people like me, it's a good thing that we all have our own ways of managing our time and managing our tasks, and none of them are bad and none of them are wrong, and that makes me very happy.
Well, unfortunately, the preponderance of studies are still trying to make it a bad thing, but I hope things turn around.
Oh, you and me both, because, I really did just, you have the little talk, oh, Denise, bad Denise, left hand in the air, right hand smacking it. I've done a lot of that. I don't do it anymore.
Be proud of yourself. Look at
glad.
What you could pull off at a deadline.
I'm telling you, and, I think a lot of people listening to this will really enjoy the conversation. Where can people find your book? Because I think that's an important thing to share, too.
Best place to find it is Amazon or Barnes & Noble, the online booksellers. I think Target, there's all kinds of them online that are selling What Motivates Getting Things Done. Or go to my website, marylamia.com, or whatmotivatesgettingthingsdone.com, and there are links there, and there's information about the books.
Excellent. Any last thoughts or tips or advice for our audience?
I think the only thing I want people to remember is that it's very, very important to understand your emotions and how they work for you, to not avoid them, to not try to get rid of them, but simply learn to understand them.
That is perfect advice. One last question. Every successful person that I know, whether I know them in person, whether I've met them online, or whether I've read their autobiography and consider them a mentor of mine, all of them, without exception, have morning success rituals. Do you want to share yours?
Morning success rituals.
Yeah, things that you do without fail. Yeah, with me it's gratitude.
I would say
I wake up and I gratitude instantly.
I wake up and have a cup of coffee, and I try nearly every day that I can, when I don't have to drive to teach graduate school, to go on Mount Tamalpais here in Marin County and walk or ride my bike. And that is very, very important. And to process your thoughts.
Exactly. I find the first thing that I do is, instantly I say thank you to whoever's listening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Then once I've got my pets fed, my feline office assistants, I can't walk past them. They herd me. So, just going outside is not an option with them. But once I've got them taken care of, First thing I do, backyard, shoes off, I'm grounding myself in the grass. Doesn't matter what the weather is.
That's a wonderful ritual. That's
it
a wonderful
really
ritual.
Is.
And having gratitude our thoughts can trigger emotions just like emotions can trigger thoughts. So having gratitude is a way to think positively about your life, and it does trigger joy.
It absolutely does. Mary, thank you so much. And as always the case, this podcast hour went way too fast. And I thank you for all of the wonderful tips and advice, and mostly the advice that you gave me. Thank you.
It's been great
really
to be with you, Denise.
That. Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks
and
for
today's
being
episode,
a great example for me.
Oh, I'm happy to. Today's episode was sponsored by my company, Your Office on the Web. If you're looking for full-on business creation services, such as web development, virtual assistance, online business management, social media marketing, and so much more, just visit Your Office on the Web. And be sure to look for us on iTunes. Just look for Your Partner in Success Radio and take us along on your success journey. Mary, thank you.
Thank you.
You can find Denise Griffiths at yourofficeontheweb.com or at gottagovirtualnow.com. Thank you for joining us on Your Partner in Success Radio.
What you doing?
Ran out of space on my phone, so I'm deleting some stuff. By singing dog. By goal.
I pronounce you.
By wedding ceremony.
Stop. At Metro PCS, you get 2 free phones with twice as much memory.
Really? Don't say bye to your memories. Switch to Metro PCS and get 2 free LG K20 Plus phones with 32 gigs when you switch 2 lines. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
What you doing?
Ran out of space on my phone, so I'm deleting some stuff. By singing dog. By goal.
I pronounce you.
By wedding ceremony.
Stop. At Metro PCS, you get 2 free phones with twice as much memory.
Really? Don't say bye to your memories. Switch to Metro PCS and get 2 free LG K20 Plus phones with 32 gigs when you switch 2 lines. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.